Okay, we're back for the final show of the day with Gauri Khandekar. She's our think tank leader, and she's a world traveler these days. And we never know whether she's going to be in Brussels or Delhi at any point in time, or any place in between, I guess. And today she's in Delhi. So welcome again to the show, Gauri.
Thank you, Jay, and good morning from Delhi.
Good morning from Delhi. We're going to call this very special show Good Morning from Delhi. Wonderful. Thank you for that. So this is midnight in Brussels has turned to Good Morning in Delhi. Fabulous. So what are you doing in India now?
Well, I'm here to work for the the European Union delegation to India, as their consultant, basically, because they're trying to set up this network of think tanks, Indo-European think tanks. And I know all the think tanks here in Delhi and the same in Europe. So I've become like the resource person. So I had them organize these two big events previously, and now it's the third one that we're preparing for. So yeah, that's what I'm doing here.
Oh, good. So you're part of the network. I guess that's a compliment, isn't it?
Yeah, I'm actually helping them create this network.
Oh, that's
And
great.
yeah, and while I'm here, it's so nice to always meet with friends and all the think tank community here. I'm also organizing an event here in Delhi for my own think tank, which will take place next month. So that also gives me a good opportunity to meet with my partners and the German foundations who are kindly sponsoring it.
Oh, very
So yeah.
nice. So tell us about your event that you're going to do next month.
Well, in the last show, we spoke about this event that we did in Brussels
Yes.
on urbanization,
Yes.
and we do the same event in New Delhi. Now, you see, Jay, as a think tanker, you want more impact for your work. And the paper I'd written was on urbanization, and how the EU and India should cooperate. And I think that's a great topic. And there are many people who thought that too, they were really kind enough to pick it up. But if you need policy change, you need to push it, and that's what think tanks should do best. And so we did an event in Brussels. We got all the officials, we got academics, but we also got like the key people around, the stakeholders. And we do the same event in Delhi, so it has double impact. So in both capitals. So that's the idea.
Yeah. Well, I'd like to take a moment here. We've talked about, your previous think tank experience with Friday out of Spain, and now the global relations. What is it? Relations
Um,
Forum. Um,
yes,
and I mean, you're in a world of think tanks. That's what you are. You
yes,
are, and we've talked about think tanks, but now it occurs to me in this conversation with you now that think tanks are more ubiquitous. They proliferated in the past few years, it strikes me, and that they're part of the
definitely.
landscape everywhere, especially, well, everywhere. And I'd like you to talk to us about the industry, if you will, of think tanks. What
Yeah.
is going on with think tanks these days?
Well, think tanks, I would say that generally they're poorly funded, really kind of idealistic organizations, some of them. But some think tanks do. The main problem for think tanks, Jay, is funding, right? Some do have private funding or government funding, which may or may not impact the quality of their output. But most of the think tanks here, um, like anywhere in the world, work on project money or research. But it's so important to have think tanks. I mean, they're an informed organization. They're filled with experts, and they're detached from the political processes. The direct political processes. And they guide, basically. Their job is guidance, critique, guidance, constructive suggestions, recommendations. And it's so nice to have someone who's basically analyzing your work and telling you, well, you're going wrong there, or you're not going right here, or this is what you should do. Uh, and it's for free. Governments receive this advice mainly for free. So I think that they're really great, and that's why I call them idealistic.
Yes, well, absolutely. I'm getting that. It sounds like the old-fashioned notion of the gadfly, that you're independent. Hopefully, you can get funding to be and remain independent, and don't have a particular agenda except to do the right thing, and you give advice. You don't know whether the government is ever going to take advice, but at least you give advice. You kind of
It's exactly that.
you kind of
Exactly.
fall in a place where maybe the press used to be before, where the press had high level people who were going to examine an issue or an event or a development around politics and diplomacy, and then come up with some analysis. And I
Yeah.
think the press stopped doing that. The press only reports the immediate facts. They don't care too much about interpretation, over the long term. And it sounds to me like there's a sea change here, Gary. The sea change is the press doesn't do it anymore. There's a vacuum, and the think tanks have grown up to fill in that vacuum. How right am I about that?
I think you're very right. You're really correct in that sense, And I think the drawback of journalistic writing in print and now online media is that they have to keep their pieces short and snappy, so that many people will read it. Their audience is wider than that of think tanks. And what think tanks really do, or their job, is to analyze. I mean, they cannot do reporting. That's not really think tanking, So they have to really assess what's going beyond that. And in that sense, it's become separated. You're right. The journalism, or uh, print media has become quite. How do you say? It caters to a daily audience, with limited attention spans.
Yeah, well, I mean, a great concern here for me is that, and when I say here, I mean the United States, is that
Yeah.
most people get their news. See, I consider the news or finding out what the news is kind of an ongoing education, a citizen's obligation, and
Right.
I think that most people get the news from the 6 o'clock and sometimes the 10 o'clock news hour. But if you watch the news hours here in Hawaii, you get sports, you get weather, you get car accidents, you
My
get
God.
crime, and you get feature stories that have no consequence.
Yeah.
And so it goes on, and sunrise and sunset, and you never actually hear the news except
Yeah.
when it's a national piece that that is also like raw meat. And very concerned about that, because if you have a diet of that, a menu of that for
Exactly.
your life, you turn out to not know anything.
Exactly, and I so much agree. Like, for instance, in Europe, not many people read the European Union news. I was sitting next to a gentleman on the plane from Ghent in Belgium, and he was not even aware of the dailies, the European dailies, because they read the Belgian news already, and that's local, and so already a large part of foreign policy, what's happening in the world, what's happening even inside the European Union, which impacts all of them, is missing. In India, you have most of the dailies or even the news, they talk so much about Bollywood, about actors and actresses, and that becomes headlines. What's the new movie? What's happening, and it's more sensational stuff than the normal stuff. And foreign policy is kept as a very small component, anyways. Domestic politics, again, is the sensational news. Oh, somebody was killed, or somebody was raped, and now it's the rapes that are featured in the news, or somebody's being unjustly kind of taken advantage of by the local
Yeah,
thug or something.
yeah.
So we miss the bigger picture sometimes, and that's also something I've remarked in the US. Because when you have shows like, well, the Daily Show for one, I used to watch it. and what's his name? Jon Stewart? No, not Jon Stewart. The other guy, the Tonight Show.
Yeah.
And they speak about foreign policy issues sometimes, and it's really like what's going on. Like this is what's going on, and we should be aware of it. And that is so necessary.
Well, the whole thing is twisted around because the most popular news doesn't ever cover that, and certainly they don't get
Yes.
analysis. And then you get these docudrama type serials on television. What comes to mind is Madam Secretary. I don't know if you've seen that in
No.
Europe. Maybe it emerged, I think, after you left Hawaii. But it's a very good show dealing with what it's like to be the Secretary of State. And there are similarities between this character and Hillary Clinton when she was Secretary of State. And so now here's a person who has not particularly read the paper or followed what it's like to be Secretary of State, who really has no actual education in that, and who gets little pieces of it from the 6 o'clock news. And all of a sudden, you get the full play of a very detailed and dramatic story on
Wow.
prime time, which isn't true. And so what happens is the viewer, and this is the American public, the viewer learns about the Department of State, learns about the issues on the desk of the Secretary of State, learns about all those things from a fictional play, which doesn't pretend in the smallest amount to be true. And so, but people take it true anyway. They take it as true anyway. And so what you have is this kind of fictitious education.
That's terrible. But you know what, Jay? Like more and more I think about it also is, everybody everywhere can literally just go on the web and go to any think tank's website. Most of the think tanks have their stuff for free. So you can freely download really up to date, accurate information, get the picture, be informed, and you're so educated in, like, after reading this one paper about a certain issue. But also think tanks do events, and it's so important to just, you can just go and attend them. You register and you attend, and you meet the right people, you get informed. And of course, Pacific Forum has been there for a long time. They do such excellent work, and I was very privileged to be a part of them, their think tank for some time. And I know there's East West Center as well. I mean, your population there is quite lucky to have such good think tanks, and they should just go attend and get informed. I read I still read Pacific Forum papers. I keep getting them in my email, so I read them, and they're so interesting.
Yeah, well, it's interesting that you have to make that effort, though. It doesn't come to you automatically.
Yes.
And I think people in general feel that a think tank website would be over their head. They wouldn't necessarily understand it. And they would feel that for every think tank website that takes position A, there's one that takes position B. So it's not necessarily going to be a view well held. And that's why what you said before strikes me is that if the think tank groups get together and they have a
Yeah.
large organizational meeting like the one you're talking about, there's
Yeah.
great power in that. Because if they speak in one voice on a given subject, say what to do about climate change, or what to do about the Middle East,
Yeah.
the migrants coming to Europe, that is going to be very powerful. And I think that has to be a trend. Not only is it interesting now, Gary, but it has to be
Yeah.
a trend in the future. That's what we will see. You are in a fabric of think tanks that will speak soon. They will be speaking together. That's what I think.
Thank you. But Jay, I mean, it's so true. It's different think tanks have different opinions, and you're very right to bring that out. But in these events, it's when you have these debates, and the think tanks make sure to get people of different opinions together, just to have them argue it out and see what's and let other people make the right decisions.
Yes.
Because if you're spoon fed one thing, and you're like, no, this is right, that's wrong. You should have the bigger picture. You should have an informed opinion to make your own decisions.
Yes.
And that's why events are great, because we bring people who might not think the same thing about the same issue, and then and let people make up their own minds.
There it is. It's arise, you think tanks of the world,
Yes.
and disagree.
Yes.
We're going to take a break, Gauri. We're going to take a short break. That's Gauri Khandekar, to Global Relations Forum. She joins us by Skype from Delhi, and that's why we're calling this show Good Morning from Delhi. We always enjoy talking with her. We'll be right back after this short break.
Aloha, I'm Kirsten Baumgart-Turner, and I host Sustainable Hawaii every Tuesday from 11 a.m. to 12 noon. My guests offer insights on challenging economic and environmental issues facing our state and offer innovative solutions to increasing Hawaii's long-term sustainability. Recently, we've been focusing on sustainable land development, food, and energy security. If you have a project or issue you'd like to discuss on the show or would like to be a guest, please contact me at kirstenbturner@gmail.com and tune in live weekly or view the show at your convenience at thinktechhawaii.com. Mahalo.
Aloha, I'm Carlos Juarez, host of Global Connections, and I want to invite you to come join us. We cover a range of global issues. We bring a lot of expert opinion, a lot of issues, whether they're contemporary events happening in the world or maybe looking at things from a more historical perspective. Global issues, very important for us to understand in this globally interconnected world. Join us here on Global Connections.
Okay, we're back with Gauri Khandekar, Global Relations Forum in New Delhi. And this is Good Morning from New Delhi. Nobody does this, Gauri, just you and me, I tell you. Good morning from New Delhi. That's ridiculous.
Good morning, Hawaii from Delhi.
So anyway, let's talk about something you wanted to talk about when we first started, and that is what in the world is going on in Syria now. I can't follow the action for 20 minutes at a time.
Yes, it's so true. Well, now the Russians have entered into Syria and they're bombing targets. And the Russians even have like a few hundred troops there to guard those planes. Around, I think, a few days ago there were a dozen aircrafts, and maybe now there's more. But yeah, the Russians have entered this Middle East boiler pot, let's say. And but the difference is that they've entered into it with the coalition, and the coalition consists of Russia, Russia, Syria, Iran, and Iraq.
Yeah.
So they have. So it's not a forced intervention,
Yeah.
which many European countries would have done if they would have gone alone. But it's really Russia cooperating with Syria and Iran and Iraq, and they're doing it together in a way. So already there's a little bit more of legitimacy there.
I'm so worried that in our global history there are times when the skin of civilization comes off, the veneer of civilization comes off, and we find that underneath we're all capable, or all nations, all groups are capable of dastardly acts. That's happened even in recent years, and I think it's happening now. This reminds me of that Robert Mitchum movie series called The Winds of War, and the notion is that the more armed conflict you put on the ground, the more likely it's going to continue and get worse. And right now we have two major powers in there at odds, and all these other people in there at odds, not necessarily working for the same cause. And in one day it could shift around so that these two major powers are looking each other right in the eye. And I worry about it becoming a confrontation between the U.S. and Russia.
Yeah, well, actually, just recently there was a warning from NATO, which said that Russia should really, stay away, because Russia had violated Turkish airspace and Turkey is a member of NATO. So Russia was warned off from NATO, saying that don't do this, otherwise it's going to be conflict. And Russia said it was an error that they violated Turkish airspace. But honestly, I really think that the world is at least a little more smarter now than before to have like conflict between NATO and Russia. I think that would end it all. I mean, if Ukraine didn't lead to conflict between Russia and NATO, then nothing is, because that's just in the center of the two continents, let's say almost. Russia is almost as big as a continent. But
You can always just stay in New Delhi. It might be,
Sorry?
you can always just stay in New Delhi.
I don't know what's safer anymore. But, we've been discussing the ISIS issue since more than a year, Jay, remember? It was the summer of gloom, and then some things better happened. But I honestly think that, ISIS is the worst thing that could happen in the Middle East. And I've not been a big fan of Western powers in the Middle East because I don't think they have the right strategy. And it's not, they don't look into the future that much. So you started off, okay, the whole Libya scenario with the Europeans bombing off Gaddafi was, really horrible because Gaddafi was like a little warlord who kept everybody, under control, and he kept the country stable. Now you have ISIS taken over it. There's nobody that can control the country. And similarly in Syria, there is this perception that, democracy is great and we should implant democracy, and that should proliferate. But with that idea in mind, so they said, okay, we support those people standing up to Assad. And that was not right because you didn't know the right picture. Democracy should flourish. I completely agree, and I come from a democracy, the largest in the world. But there are certain conditions. And what the West didn't understand was really the alignment of these people that were opposing Assad. Some of them were even terrorists, and they armed this opposition. Now, this armed opposition, where do the weapons go? Some go also, most of them also went to ISIS. ISIS is like the most well-funded terrorist organization in the world. And then you have, I saw a clip of President Putin the other day, and he's like, these are mercenaries, they go and then, they either fight with the opposition or they fight with ISIS. They just go. They get paid and they run off. And just toppling over Assad would have really created a sea of instability in the Middle East. I mean, ISIS would have taken over very quickly. My thinking is that, you first need to take out the bad elements, which is ISIS. Then you can move towards democracy, then have an informed dialogue or whatever, And the Russians seem to be doing that because for them, the biggest threat is that Syria collapses. And then, of course, it leads to a topple-on effect. Iraq is as good as collapsed anyways, It's really extremely fragile country with quite significant parts under ISIS control. And then the only other big ally, the only other big regional power is Iran. Now, Iran is strong, but if ISIS proliferates and then spreads to Iran as well, I mean, you have no Middle East left, You have like borderless elements of terrorist organizations running it. And this is the world's most oil-rich, one of the world's most oil-rich areas. And they're important strategic gateways of trade, also between Europe and Asia. So I personally think it's extremely important to have some kind of stability, some kind of Westphalian notion of state sovereignty still in that area.
It goes lower and lower, and it doesn't seem like there's any safety net under it. I mean, it seems like it's heading for a state of nature. Everybody on his own, and violence rules in large areas of territory.
Yes.
And the destruction not only of historical objects and temples and what have you, architecture, icons of one kind or another, but the destruction of the whole civilization.
Yes.
People, running from their own homes, large numbers. It's like the whole area is being hollowed out, and what's going to fill it is going to be really bad. And
Yes, chaos. We still, the Westphalian notion of sovereignty is still the most stable notion that we have
Yeah.
as yet.
yeah,
How states are managed, how, the state as entities have brought about peace to their states, but of course, there are pros and cons. But when you have this notion of, like you said, we're going backwards, and when you have lawlessness, little chieftains, and feudal systems in a way, but also coupled with Sharia law, and then guns and arms, and then you have utter chaos. Utter chaos. There's no rule of law. There's no common interest, and it's utter chaos. And that's where these ISIS terrorists want to take the region. They want to build. They have this notion of a caliphate that they would like to build, but of course, practically it doesn't make sense, anyways. But the intolerance that is kind of spreading out from the Middle East for historical artifacts, other religions, for differences, even against women, and that is something really that should not be accepted. And I always forget. There's a very beautiful saying. I always forget who said it, but it starts as for evil to flourish, good men should not. The only reason how evil will flourish is for good men to do nothing. I think it's something like that. It's so true.
Yeah, this reminds me of a comment made by a retired, I forget his name, chief of the CIA, who was on television over the weekend. Somebody asked him, "Is ISIS winning?" He said, "Well, that's a hard question. ISIS. The point about ISIS is it still exists, and
Yeah.
that nobody who has taken a whack at it has been successful in bringing it down. And the
Yes.
fact that it still exists is probably a good statement that it is winning, because it still controls so much territory, and it has a system where people are subjugated, and whole place is essentially coming apart, and the great powers are unable to do anything about it. And I frankly don't think that Russia's involvement is going to help at all, and I don't think that our involvement has helped or will help, and the whole thing seems to be just sinking lower and lower. Winds of War out of Robert Mitchum and Ali Monroe. It reminds me also of a book back in written in the 60s by the name of The Guns of August. Barbara Tuchman out of Columbia, and she described the elements that brought us to World War I, and remarkably similar, with everybody, taking positions, having war plans, building weapons, and all of a sudden one silly thing happens, and all those war plans are sprung into action. And I think the more violence there is, the more violence there will be. And that's why Putin is so irresponsible in doing this. Struck me also that you look at the television now and you see scenes of Russian fighters dropping bombs on civilian communities in Syria. And then you see, the crosshairs of the bomb site. You see the bomb going down and igniting, and then all the smoke coming up. What is that reminiscent of? That's reminiscent of what we saw on television in Iraq from American planes. And what it shows, I think what Putin wants to show, is that he can do the same thing. He has fighter bombers the same way, with that same kind of technology, can show you the same kind of footage. He wants to show that Russia is coming back. and that's all important to him. But it's very dangerous business.
Yeah, I mean, I have, India has been a friendly country to Russia for a long time. I tend to see things in a different light, you know. I mean, for me, really, Russia could have intervened anywhere else as well. But the Syria issue is becoming extremely tricky.
How do
I mean,
people in India feel about what's happening in Syria?
yeah, India has this non-aligned position,
Mm.
strictly non-aligned. This non-alignment has the idea of non-alignment, meaning this ideology emerged during the Cold War. It was Nehru's brainchild. And he said that when you had the two Cold War camps, he said, we're not going to align with either. We're going to pursue our own development. And there are many countries that are non-aligned, including China. So they will never have. They're completely against intervention, military intervention. They believe in state sovereignty, and a state should be allowed to solve its own matters. So India is completely against foreign intervention of any kind. But in the foreign policy circles, people do accept that the Middle East is sinking and something needs to be done.
Yeah.
They also appreciate it, to be very frank, what the US did in Afghanistan, because it was a geopolitical threat to India. The Taliban and also terrorist elements in Pakistan were huge terror threat to India. And the US and its allies, even if India has been, quite reticent to publicly show its appreciation, has been quite thankful. And I think the same is also true about Syria. Anybody doing something is great. Now, but what the Europeans did created a bit more instability, especially in Libya.
Yeah, especially if
That
it's close.
was-
Yeah. Let's take a short break, Gauri. We're going to take a short break here with Gauri Khandekar with Global Relations Forum. We reach her by Skype in Delhi. We're calling this Good Morning from Delhi. We'll be right back after the short break, and we'll talk some more about whether India's view in this matter might change because of the think tanks. Yeah, I see. Yeah, we're having a little.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, I think it might be connection here because internet is not really that great.
Hi, my name's Hillary Weinberg. I'm the host of The Whole Gamut on ThinkTech Hawaii. See us live every Tuesday at 1 p.m. or on our YouTube channel to hear us talk about world affairs from Hawaii and beyond. See you then.
Hi, I'm your host, Asia Bill Sharp. I look forward to you joining us each Monday between 4 and 5 o'clock when we film right here in our studio in downtown Honolulu. The show, ThinkTech Asia, focuses on contemporary events in Asia. And by Asia, we mean anything from Hawaii, south to Australia and New Zealand, west to Pakistan, and as far north as the Russian Far East. Clearly, this is one of the most economically dynamic centers of the world, and we bring you up to date on what's going on in a whole host of countries in this very vital region. We look forward to seeing you. Aloha.
Global Relations Forum. She joins us by Skype from Delhi, and it's Good Morning from Delhi. That's what we're doing here on midnight in Brussels. It's Delhi. Anyway, so I want to examine this whole thing about what did you call it? Non-involvement,
Non-alignment.
non-alignment. Because, from a moral point of view, what's happening in Syria is immoral. Doesn't matter who you are, doesn't matter your cultural, religious background, there's no defense for what's happening there. It's the slaughter of innocent men, women, and children. Who have no interest in war or violence, and yet they're being slaughtered. A society is being destroyed. And it seems to me that every country in the world has an obligation to at least make a statement about the moral aspect to that and maybe take affirmative action about it. You mentioned earlier that the think tanks were meeting, the think tanks were having their discussions, and maybe the think tanks would actually do some public relations about the issues they raise and suggest that government should be listening to them. Is the process such with the think tanks that maybe, say, for example, the government of India would listen and say, no, we can't have non-alignment in a world that is flaming around us? What is the possibility of that?
Well, I just wrote a chapter in my book on non-alignment, where is it going basically? And non-alignment is here to stay. And I think it's the most pragmatic foreign policy for India. Not because the world is falling down and, India should not do something, but India's approach is quite different. You see, every state has its own interests, every state, and they pursue their own interests without exception. And India does the same. Now, India's policy is less interventionist. So it will not go and bomb or attack. And it's never opened war on any country, and that's a record. It's never started war. First use of weapons is not permitted in India. It's in our constitution. And the world would rather have such a country than a country which, would go and bomb this one or that one. Now, the Syria issue is tricky. Most think tanks here have said that, the Middle East, even though it's one of the most strategically important zones or regions in the world for India, because we have our largest diaspora in the Middle East, our foreign remittances, the largest amount comes from the Middle East, India's energy resources come from the Middle East, and so on, and still India neglects the Middle East quite a bit in its foreign policy. But when this question comes up, should India do something, and especially if people from the West bring it up, then India's response is really, what happened in Darfur? Why didn't you stop the genocide in Darfur or South Sudan or Sudan, or or then why not take tougher action against Saudi Arabia? China, Japan, even the US have atop the world's list of executions. Did you know that? It's quite something. So when even Western European countries, they have these human rights dialogues with India and a number of other countries, and they pinpoint, what you're doing, and they said, well, you cannot have a moral high ground, I mean, there should be some balance, and if there's no balance, if there's no hypocrisy, then we can have an understanding. But the Indians have brought up quite many times Sudan, Darfur, Somalia, and issues like this which go on.
Well, what are you in your writing your book and talking about rethinking non-alignment and all that? Are you alone, or are other people of the same mind? How are the other think tanks thinking?
There are not many actually who are analyzing this non-alignment issue. There's a very tiny percentage of the intellectual community that talks about, well, we should be more interventionists as well. We should be more, taking more action, especially because India is becoming a more global power. But most of them feel that, no, we have enormous problems to solve at home. Poverty is really large, and, it's not really something that India can afford to neglect. Mm-hmm. So this is the priority. Domestic issues are priority, and that kind of kills any foreign policy ambition, beyond bringing economic and survival resources back home.
Can you put this in the context of the attack on Mumbai? What is it? 4 years ago, 3-4 years ago. That was a terrorist attack. Could happen again.
Yes, and it's happened many times after that. So the terrorist attacks took place in 2008. in a big hotel, but also Jewish centers. As you might know, India has some of the oldest Jewish communities. And if you see, India didn't react at that time. That was really maturity in a way, because we knew there were people from Pakistan. There was proof that those people who came were from Pakistan. And we just didn't. I mean, it's a mature democracy. We said, okay, this happened, and we should fortify our borders. But there was no action taken in that sense, no violent action. And India also has a large number of Muslims, and inter-religious tensions in the country are touchy issue, and they can flare up. But they didn't, even though, India was, the Hindus did not blame the Muslims for that. It was, foreign terrorists that did it. And I don't think that, that has changed anything in terms of foreign policy beyond, stalling dialogue with Pakistan, making sure that, that this does not happen, that terrorists do not just come across in the boat from Pakistan, but there are steps being taken to make sure that, internal security has been strengthened.
So that's it then. And I guess the government decided as a matter of policy, they would not take any steps in retribution or any steps across the border. I wonder if he even took diplomatic steps. It was just a matter of firming up the security arrangements so to minimize this risk ahead.
And diplomatic steps, yes. With Pakistan, yes, all dialogues were suspended. We're still waiting for them to prosecute the perpetrators of these attacks, the masterminds.
Yeah.
And Pakistan is not willing to do that in a way. I mean, they're roaming free almost. Some have been kept in jail, but they go in and out, and there's not really something nice. Anyway, and the Mumbai attacks were like India's 9/11. But
Yes.
India did not react in a violent way. I mean, they just, this happened, and both India and Pakistan are nuclear armed states. So both have to be extremely responsible anyways, You can't have nuclear warfare across the border. And I think it was a mature way to react and say, okay, this happened. Well, we need to just make sure that it doesn't happen again.
Well, it certainly requires vigilance, and India finds itself in an interesting spot. As you say, it's more a global power now than it ever was.
Yes.
And with great global power, there comes great global responsibility. Can I say
Yes.
that?
Of course. That's true, and that's what most of us here are pushing for, within these confines of non-alignment, within these confines of non-interventionism even. Can India really make global changes? And there are certain issues where it can, for example, maritime freedom, and push for dialogue on that, push for freedom of navigation in terms of human security. Already what countries like India and China are doing to lift their people out of poverty is humongous. I mean, every year, there are literally hundreds of millions that are lifted out of poverty. And that's quite a bit. But I agree with you in terms of just external foreign cooperation or foreign policy. India needs to do more, even if it means tackling climate change at home or free trade in that sense. But I personally am quite against foreign intervention. So.
Well, are you going to stay there for a long time? Are you heading back to Brussels soon now?
I'm staying here until for a week.
Yeah.
And then I head back on Sunday to Brussels.
Well, is it fair to say we'll be able to talk when you get back to Brussels 2 weeks from today?
Of course, and I look forward to it. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Gauri. Always wonderful. Wherever you are in the world, we'll follow you anywhere.
Oh, how nice. Thank you so much, Jay.
Gauri Khandekar, Global Relations Forum. Good morning from Delhi. Thank you so much. Next time soon. Aloha.
Aloha.